this together, and I mostly will be trying to corral the Destroy All panelists panel because we've got a lot of people up here this time. And to my right,
Jeff Horn,
Mike Sutton,
Colin McMahon,
and last but not least, Kevin Horn.
It was like an hour long.
so as this trailer runs, yesterday there was a panel on Destroy All Monsters that Ed Godzilla and Steve Reifel did. How many of you were actually at that panel yesterday? I'm really glad a couple people from the panel made it. I'm assuming that panel was very heavy into production, behind the scenes, probably filled with a lot of amazing photos from behind the scenes. This panel is going to be a little bit different. We're not up here necessarily to talk about the making of the film, or any of that kind of production material. We're really here to talk about the movie itself, our memories of the film, what makes this such a special film for us. I'm assuming everyone on the panel, since they volunteered, actually liked this movie. So we'll talk a lot about that. And actually, Andy, can you go ahead and switch us back over to the computer? All right, so just to get started, just to get us kind of all on the same page, I was going to just take us through, obviously this film features 11 different kaiju from Toho's monster universe. And I just want to go through all 11 of them and just get some impressions from people up here as far as, what they think of these particular versions of the monsters, their inclusion in the movie, and maybe what monsters got left out that they would have liked to have seen. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with this version of Godzilla, which is actually my favorite of the Showa suits. I know a lot of people like the suit from Godzilla vs. Mothra, but for me, Destroy All Monsters and Smog Monster were on TV all the time as a kid, so I saw this suit a lot. So when I see this suit, for me, this is actually Godzilla.
I would agree with that statement 100%. As Martin pointed out, the two films that he just mentioned, Destroy All Monsters and Smog Monster, both had the same suit. You grow up seeing those films a lot, and that was Godzilla to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us up here actually grew up in the Chicago area, and so throughout like the 70s, this movie was on a lot, and it was just like such a huge treat when you saw that in the TV guide listing, and you knew that was going to be coming up.
Yeah, not just that, but when you didn't even realize it existed, and you stumbled upon it, and just it was a smorgasbord. What? Godzilla and Mothra's in this, and Rodan, and so yeah, watching it on TV and discovering it was. You were very glad the way it ran on TV in those days was Saturday night, 8 o'clock or so was the main feature, and they'd repeat it the next Sunday, or Sunday the next day at noon. And so you'd see it like, I missed the first 5 minutes of it, oh, that's okay. And this was pre-VCR days, pre-video on demand days.
Yeah, you missed it.
Yeah, except if it was on Saturday, you could watch it Sunday at noon.
I told Martin that literally, this movie, I must have been a toddler the first time I saw it, because it's one of my earliest memories of seeing Mothra in the train station on TV, and then Godzilla walking around, and I don't know what the first TV broadcast date was in this area, but that had to have been it. That had to have been when I was watching it. So this movie means a lot to all of us because it's been with us literally our whole life.
Yep. So now we've got Mothra, the larval Mothra. Any comments on this one?
Was this the first one where she showed up with red eyes? 'Cause that's what I kind of remember as a kid, being like, is Mothra evil?
I'm colorblind, so I'm not really the person to ask.
I believe the eyes were blue in Mothra vs. Godzilla, so yes, I believe this was the first time there was red eyes.
I kind of always assumed that because she was under the alien control that the eyes switched to red, and that's, even though they show her beforehand, kid thing.
We've got Rodan. I believe this is a new suit
Yeah,
for this movie. The banana nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely, we're getting into goofy, kind of goofy looking Rodan. How many people are here are familiar with Shinji Nishikawa's artwork, his suit, like his chibi, super deformed art? For those of you who aren't, seek it out because it's amazing, but he does, every time he draws this version of Rodan, it's so funny because he puts like the big Cookie Monster googly eyes on it, and it just works perfectly.
You know, there's of course a lot of Rodan fans here that really like the scary 1956 Rodan, and I love it too. But this guy is if you want to say as goofy as he looks, I think it's just as cool. I have no problem with this Rodan at all.
Another new suit, another monster that appeared for the first time in over 10 years for this film is Anguillus. For me, I love this suit so much more than the original suit, even. It's definitely my favorite version of the character, although we really only had 3 versions of this, right? Beautiful suit, and a brand new suit, so of course got a lot of screen time.
Right, and I think that Toho must have loved it as well because continued to use it further on down the line, even to the point that when the 2 fangs fell out, they continued to use it.
Yeah, this is definitely my favorite version of Angie. And also, just like what Jeff said, they must have kept trying it out, so they must have loved it too. But another thing too is you'll notice, like in the toys and model kits and that kind of stuff, this is, and even on the Toho, like their books and stuff, this is the preferred image of Anguillus. It's pretty much become the standard.
I was also going to say that was the movie that really established the Anguirus character. Like when Ghidorah lands, even though he's much smaller, Anguirus is the first monster. He just charges him again and again, and that's really, I think where kind of the personality of Anguirus was created. Let's destroy all monsters.
I think it's funny too how much of the character came out just basically because, hey, we've got a new suit, so we're going to use it a lot because the other suits don't look so hot. So as a result, like you get actually a lot of screen time for Anguillus, and that gives him all that character. So now we have Manila or Minya, probably a polarizing figure at this convention. And I'll be honest with you, I love Minya.
Me too.
I went through this whole period when I was really little. I thought he was really cute and I loved him, and then I became a teenager and college age, and I kind of completely, I turned my back on poor little Minya, and I was just like, I'm a Godzilla fan, but some of this stuff is kind of goofy and not cool. But now I'm older and I don't really care what anybody thinks. So it's like, no, Minya's cool.
Well, how many girls and guys out here like Minya? How many just can't stand him? Ooh. Well,
we should probably.
I thought
it's like a wedding. It's like a wedding. Are you on the Minya's hater side or the Minya lovers side?
You're in the middle? Or just either what you can take them or leave them? Okay, I understand.
Gorosaurus, not a new suit, but it was a fairly recently made suit for King Kong Escapes the year prior to Destroy All Monsters. And this isn't my favorite kaiju in the Godzilla universe, that's actually coming up, but this is possibly one of my favorite suits that they ever made. I love this suit. I think it's just such a beautifully designed suit. Really elegant looking, lots of neat detail, and a lot of cool character.
Martin, would you agree with me that I believe that Gorosaurus was included in the kaiju gang that Tom Monson simply because the suit was so well made, and they just said, well, let's put him in there.
I'm sure it was because it was well made and it was still pretty new. So it's like they had to probably do minimal touch up on it to make sure it was film ready.
I think it was also because Gorosaurus was just such a good actor that he was able to play the role of Baragon.
That's true.
I'd say cheaper than building a new Baragon suit.
Manda appeared last in Atragon actually several years earlier, and looking a little bit different. I've actually heard a lot of different speculation of why he looks so different. A lot of, early on, people were saying that the reason he lost all his horns and little frills is to make him look less like King Ghidorah in this movie. I suspect, more likely, this was, Atragon was what, or 63? So that was 5 years earlier, so latex and rubber doesn't hold up well, especially in warehouses in Japan. My guess is that those bits were probably so rotted away and in such bad shape, they just said, we'll cut them off, cut them off, make them look a little different.
Well, also, I will add that what I was told, and I don't recall if it was a person that told me this or I read this, that one reason that he looks different and more snake-like and his features were altered is because in Atragon, Manda is a sea serpent, and in Destroy All Monsters, he's always on land. So maybe they decided, well, to make him look more like a big snake, we'll just take the frills off and lose the cat eyes, and now he looks just like a big snake with little legs.
I think it's interesting that we can come up with like a million explanations. They actually all sound pretty good, and who knows what the actual...
Yeah, we'll probably never know.
You know, for me, again, as a kid, when this movie was on TV, I had never seen Atragon. I didn't see Atragon for like 20 years after, you know, I was watching this regularly. So this is one of those things where, you know, it's like this universe building thing. Like, you know, now we have all the Marvel Universe movies, but at this point, it's like I got this sense that there was all this history, you know, all these things, all these monsters that had backstories that I had no clue, you know, about. And it's so, you know, as much as I always loved Godzilla, even as a kid, when I'd watch this, I was actually way more fascinated by some of the, you know, the second tier monsters like Manda, who just were kind of there, here and there, and I didn't really know who they were or what their backstory was. Kumanga, although since many of us are up here talking about watching this as a kid, Spiga. I honestly, I have a hard time calling him Kumanga just for decades of Spiga, but you know, since we don't want to make Toho angry at a convention, we'll go with the Toho name. I'm monopolizing time.
Another eye color change on the Kumanga suit.
Yeah, you know, that's true.
Purple rather than red. Yeah.
I'm really glad that they put him in there because it just makes Monster Island just a more exotic place. Big snakes, flying reptiles, Godzilla, giant insects, big arachnids. It's just, I'm really glad that they put him. He doesn't do a lot, but you know, when he's on screen, he's really fun to watch when everything's going crazy.
And presumably when they made Son of Godzilla the year before, they obviously must have had two Kumanga puppets, since one of them got, you know, burned in the climax, and so luckily they had a second one, and I'm guessing that's partly the reason why none of the Kamakiras appear in Destroy All Monsters, because as my recollection is pretty much all of those puppets got destroyed in Son of Godzilla.
I would also imagine that Kumanga was included because they were able to use the stock footage of King Ghidorah covered in the silk with Mothra and Kumanga blowing the silk onto it.
Varan. Another monster that at the time you see him in just such brief glimpses in this movie, and they don't even say his name in the movie, right? It's just like he's just there. And as a kid, I mean,
yeah, this was the one I was most like intrigued by as a kid, because like watching this, like him,
that guy?
Yeah, it's like him, Baragon, Amanda. I was like, who are these people? And especially Varan, as you said, they never even mention his name. He's just always in the background.
Yeah, the scene at the end where the helicopter's flying off, and they're making a very vivid point of focusing in on that static puppet going up and down. You're like, am I supposed to know what that is? I don't even know what that monster. I hadn't seen Moran at that point, and using just that puppet was all that was left.
Right.
You know what? I never put those two together. I never knew his name until years later.
Yeah.
Until you just brought that up, it never occurred to me.
I was going to say the same thing what Mark was saying before, but sort of like, who's that? And I got to go and find out who he is, find out what movie he's in, track it down and watch it.
which was a lot harder back then.
Back then, yeah. I had to keep looking through the TV guide and try to find movies.
And I think when I finally did see the American version of Varan the Unbelievable, I don't even think I put it together that monster was this, because he's so briefly seen, and they pretty much cut all the flying scenes too out of the American cut. All right, Baragon. That's actually my, everyone has, everyone's favorite is Godzilla. My favorite non-Godzilla kaiju is Baragon. I just love this design. Unfortunately, you don't get to see a whole lot of it in Destroy All Monsters, and he even gets accredited with the destruction of Paris when he had nothing to do with that. Baragon comics? Anyone else have a deep-rooted love for Baragon?
That's a great design.
Yeah, I mean, the only comments is the reason why he wasn't in there is that suit was just decimated. And it first appeared in Frankenstein Conquers the World, was used at least as 2, if not 3 Ultra Monsters.
Ranga and
And it was, I mean, the head was cut off and completely different head used.
right.
Right. And then they brought it back, and I don't know at what point in the production it was brought back, or they tried to put it back together. I would guess, I don't know if they filmed chronologically, but I would guess the suit just wasn't ready when they did the Gorosaurus.
And you know what? It's fun to speculate, but you know what we're talking about is the suit was in rough shape, and maybe if it wasn't, he would have probably had more to do in the movie.
And for me, as far as the suit goes, the design of Baragon, you know, I mentioned how beautiful Gorosaurus is, but when you look at Gorosaurus, Godzilla, you know, they're basically dinosaurs, and then you've got, you know, Kumonga's a giant spider, and it's, you know, Baragon to me, that's a kaiju, right? That is almost for me like the definition of a kaiju, because it's this giant monster. It's kind of a reptile, but it doesn't look like anything. Well, except maybe you know, a pug dog, but I don't think they were going for that.
Well, he's like kind of like a dinosaur, but he's not. Maybe you could say, oh, he kind of looks like a dragon, but not really. He's just his own thing, and it's really cool. I would agree. That's what makes a kaiju.
King Ghidorah.
Everyone's favorite bad guy, right?
You know, I always think that despite the fact that King Ghidorah is advertised prominently, like in every poster and every trailer, it somehow always seems like a surprise when suddenly King Ghidorah shows up as the agent of the Keylux. It's just like such a, you know, it's not a twist, but for some reason it just always feels like it.
Well, one of the other things, Martin, that's one of my favorite shots from Destroy All Monsters. At the end, when obviously Achilles fights him and he just lands on top, flattens him out, takes the steps and keeps on going. So I'm glad you put that up.
And that's it for the monsters. So I'm going to actually. So I'm going to show a little short video. We don't need sound, Andy's not there anyway. I'm just going to show a really brief video that a lot of you have probably seen, but it's a deleted scene from Destroy All Monsters. Actually, Ed may have shown it yesterday as well. But it's a scene that you can see here. A little shot during the attack on Tokyo, where actually Godzilla and Manda start to fight a little bit in the streets of Tokyo. You've got Manda wrapped around this building. So let's watch. So it's short, but there it is. I've heard people say that this was an ad-libbed moment. I don't actually buy that, just because you're talking about having to have puppeteers and pyrotechnics and everything else on set to do all this, and I kind of don't buy that they just on a whim said, hey, let's just do this. So I'm guessing, again, an explanation I've heard that does not necessarily, it's not necessarily true, but you know, a lot of it is, there's a certain thing that doesn't make sense, is if all these monsters are being controlled by the Keylux, why would 2 of them suddenly start fighting each other?
Right, and plus there's that little bit of a building that topples over there. And that's not gonna, there was no ad-libbing. Oh yeah, you can go ahead and knock that over. It's okay, we don't need that. That
Just build another one.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Martin on that, 100%. Because I believe what probably happened was they were probably shooting it for inclusion. And the pyro brought up way too much smoke. So I think it was probably dubbed a no good NG, and they just kind of left it on the cutting room floors. Oh, that was so long.
But I am glad that footage, they saved it, and you always wonder like how much cool stuff is out there that is just lost forever. So from here on out, I actually just have slides running. They are not going to be synced with what we're talking about at all, so we're kind of ad-lib lightning round. We can pretty much discuss anything we want, memories, impressions of the movie.
Just to talk about that clip again, for me that was like the holy grail. When I heard about it, I had to find it, because everybody talked about it. So all through the comic conventions and sci-fi conventions, I was always looking around trying to find it. It took me a good 10, 15 years to finally find somebody with a copy that I could see it. I don't know if anybody else had that same experience.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I think I saw a clip here at one of my first G-Fests. And then I was like going around at other conventions, to all the less reputable video dealers that were so prevalent at gray market video dealers at conventions. And I finally found the VHS that was, the VHS tape that was like the Toho lost footage tape that had like trailer footage and other special effects outtapes. And that was always my favorite part of that whole tape.
There's some pieces of that are also, I think, Amanda, not walking or whatever, down the street, not wound around the monorail track, and the tracer bullets going by and everything as well. So there's a bit more of it to that. It's interesting because it's something we hadn't seen, the puppet acting in a way or being used in a way that we don't see in the movie. It was just a nice bit of saved footage.
Someone must have really loved Mando, because looking at this poster, I love that he's the fourth monster named. He's like barely in the movie, but Mothra, Godzilla, Rodan, Mando.
Well, AIP did release Atragon, so that was kind of their monster,
that makes
right?
sense.
But I was got a kick out of that too. I also like that most of the monsters on that poster don't look really anything like.
So Martin's mentioning AIP, and we were just discussing that, how difficult it was to find a copy of this film for a few years at the very least. But I remember that it actually became, when it started making the rounds, you could get the Japanese version pretty easily, but what did everyone want? They wanted the AIP one that was on TV, and that was the one that unfortunately had to, how did you say, go to the gray market for that. And
there's food in abundance here.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when I was in college and my friends and I would have these movie nights, and a lot of times we'd have these monster movie nights. Often we would watch TNT Monster Vision when that was still a thing, but on other nights we would just go to the Blockbuster and rent a bunch of movies, and we got into this Godzilla kick. I'm like, okay, I kind of am like the local expert, if you will, on Godzilla, so I'll go to the video store, I'll get the good ones, and we'll have a marathon. And I was determined at that point, gotta get this Royal Monsters. And so I was really stunned and disappointed when I got to the video store and there's no Royal Monsters tape. I didn't realize that had not been released and would not be released on home video for many years. So I was so bummed when I had to come back and I had like, well, I've got these other movies, but I really wanted to see that one.
Character somewhere in the audience I saw. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead and stand up.
Yeah.
Stand up and give us a wave.
Okay, so this is Kyoko Ai, long-time girlfriend of mine, the evil queen of the key locks.
We are going to control you now. She just says it so matter-of-factly.
Right off the bat, when she starts talking, she just starts saying nasty, mean, evil things. And so there's no doubt that the key locks are meanies, whereas like the Exians, you weren't sure what they were up to. But when they infiltrate the base on the island, and then they're told, hey, there's something wrong over there, and the key locks are definitely evil, which is they made that clear really, really early on in And that's cool, because you want the bad guys to be bad guys and the good guys to be even better good guys.
I always love too how arrogant they were. I mean, even when their plan is going completely wrong and they've lost control of all the monsters, they're like, it's okay, we have King Ghidorah, there's no way we can lose. And then of course the fight happens and they're like, we still have the fire dragon. They're just always prepared.
I love the look on her face when she's still being all arrogant. She's on the screen going, you're gonna lose, and then you hear Godzilla roar, and you just see all the confidence drain out of her face as she looks off to the side.
She was even smiling at those guys when they were shooting her, remember, when she had the force field? Like, whatever.
Speaking of the force field, this is probably my most watched film. I mean, this is maybe the only movie, along with possibly Star Wars, that I know I will watch at least once every year, probably multiple times. It's been a New Year's Eve tradition for my wife and I ever since 1999. So, because of course, we started it that year because it was 1999, and then
Oh my God.
and then it just became our tradition. But as you watch this over and over again, you start to pick up things. And you mentioned the force field, and there's a couple of moments in two different scenes where actors are pushing up against the force field, and I'm so appreciative of the fact that they took the time to actually put up like a glass window, a glass wall, so that when they push their hands up against it, they're actually pushing against something real instead of just kind of miming something being there. And I find that to be just such a great moment and a great detail that honestly they didn't need to do. I mean, because they're actors, they can pretend. Say that again? Okay. Batman was not in this movie.
No.
Kevin, do you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I really liked the little maquette that you had, Moran. Of course, it was just a little static model, but, and like everybody else said, when I was a kid and saw this in the theater in the first initial run, so I'm just like 1 year younger than T-Rex, but anyway, it was the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. And I thought they did a really bang-up job for what they had to work with in time constraints.
Well, and then this maquette you see is actually all they used for the movie, because you just see him kind of,
And then they had similar maquettes for Baragon and a small puppet for Manda that they use in the final battle. They're just kind of sitting they're basically in the bleacher seats, just watching everyone else duke it out.
Well, that's a cool tradition that you and Pam have, and that just goes to show that if you like this movie, and I agree with you, I just never get sick of it. Mm-hmm. Never. If I watched it twice in a row, if you forced me to do it, I still would get something out of the second viewing immediately after the first. It's just that good. It's that fun. Yeah, that's why it's famous.
Pam yesterday was volunteering to guard the Destroy All Monsters display room, which if you haven't been, definitely go down and check it out. But they have the movie playing on the TV in there. Oh, no, they don't. They don't have the movie playing on the TV. No, they don't, because that would be, unlicensed. But, people, she...
They have a movie playing.
But she was sitting there, so pretend this conversation's not happening. She was sitting there, and someone said to her, "Oh, I'm sorry you have to, sit in here for so long." We'll come back to this picture in a second. But her response is like, "What are you talking about? This is great. I get to watch this for, I'm on my second round right now." And she was perfectly happy with it.
Even if it's just a few minutes, what he's talking about is the people that like this movie, whatever they're doing, even for a few minutes, they'll stop and check out as much as they can before they gotta move on.
And speaking of checking out as much as they can, here's some, I love the fact that they would take these suits out on publicity tours. And these are like department store publicity tours where they got a bunch of models in bikinis to pose with the monsters. So Baragon was apparently, too busy to appear much in the movie, but not too busy to hang out poolside.
I've seen the Baragon photo many times, but I've never seen the Gorosaurus one. Do you identify the model?
No, I
Can I get copies?
So, does anybody have anything they want to actually bring up?
Yeah, Mark, what were you talking about yesterday? About that one scene about the scream?
Oh, thank you. Again, another thing, what happens when you watch a lot of these, and I'm hoping I'm going to blow some of your minds. When you watch this movie a lot, you start to pick up things you never noticed before. And at one point it dawned on me, so there's the scene where Dr. Otani, who's under the Helok control, gets captured and they're interrogating him in the hotel room. And they take a break and he just calmly, he's under the Helok control and they don't want him to give away any of their secrets. So he just, under their control, just calmly walks to the window, opens it, steps out and jumps to his death. And it always seemed funny to me that he was screaming on the way down because he did this all voluntarily. When did he scream? And then why did he scream? And then one day I suddenly had this realization that, oh my God, those sick bastards, they cut off control just after he jumped. So he suddenly woke up and went and was like plunging to his death, screaming. And I just suddenly thought, wow, that's really sadistic. Am I the only person who?
It fits with the Ewoks.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the only rational explanation.
Yes.
It's not like he was going, woohoo!
He wasn't scared of anything else, so he's screaming because he snapped out of it at the wrong time. You had a
take a
question?
So the question was that in the original script, Magma was the giant walrus from Gorath was supposed to be,
as well.
and Everett was also supposed to be in this.
Kamacuras, too, was meant to be.
Yeah, there were a lot of monsters who were originally planned to be in there. I believe at least one of the Gargantuas was supposed to be in there.
Yeah.
The best way that I would answer that is, when they're putting the ideas together for a movie this big, of course you're going to have draft one, draft two, and then, let's put everybody in there, then, hey, narrow it down, and I like this guy, this makes sense. Yeah, it's true at one point. What was the title of that? All Monsters Directive, or
The first kind of...
Yeah, the first... Anyway, you're right. The walrus was considered, and so was the sea monster, and for whatever reason, they just decided on what they decided on, and I'm cool with that. I don't know what the walrus would have added.
I think a lot of it was budget, too, just because, we tend to think, and they discussed this on the panel, this was the pinnacle, but for Toho, this was actually kind of a waning period where these movies... I looked it up beforehand. This movie had a budget of 200 million yen and only made about 230 million yen in Japan. So they were really just, breaking even / getting a little profit. They didn't even have enough to redo the Baragon suit or give Varan an actual suit. So I think that's why some of these monsters got put to the cutting room floor.
Yeah. So this picture right here actually is one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Very iconic.
When they're talking about where they found all the control units, and they're talking about they found them in seashells and inside this coconut, and I just love the fact that they actually apparently before they took the coconut down and got rid of the device, they wanted to make sure they took a picture of it on the tree. It's that particular coconut.
And that's the sneaky Keloks for you, right? I mean, hiding in one of their devices in a coconut in the middle of nowhere.
So you're back. Would you like to make a comment?
Would you like to
Put you on the spot?
I like coconuts and turtles.
So, what are some of your favorite moments from this movie?
For me, where I touched on, I think it was the introduction, for me anyway, Varan, Baragon, and Manda, and just knowing that the world of monsters was so much bigger. And I mean, also, you gotta love that final fight, even if it's so one-sided. And Ghidorah, he looks like he's holding his own for maybe 30 seconds before it goes completely against him. But that's amazing to me.
When the newsman is in the field and he starts saying, well, here they come, and one by one, that always gets me, because I just start getting really, really excited. And you see, here comes Mia, right?
Yeah.
That part always sticks out to me, where I start getting charged watching it, right before the big fight.
Terrific build-up.
Yeah, I love the final battle scene. That's my favorite, of course. Ranking in a very close second, though, is when Godzilla attacks the key lock base and his plier doesn't work, so he ends up kicking it, resting a little bubble. I love that part. That is so cool.
I love any scene that has the Moonlight SY3 in it.
Yeah, we haven't really talked
We
about
haven't
that.
talked about that.
That's a really cool model, and it was huge. Such a huge model on that set.
And the guys, the Kubo and the gang that are the pilots and the astronauts are a tough group. They've got their own guns and they're tasked with, hey, never mind the moon, come back and go to Monster Island, and there's trouble there, and they have our astronauts go down there almost like soldiers to go clean it up.
These astronauts are in gunfights at one point, and they're basically they do everything. They're pilots, they're ground troops, they do it all.
And the Moonlight SY3 as a machine is just one of the coolest Toho
Mechs.
mechs, if you want to say it like that. That I don't even think they matched it to this date. I just think it's that cool.
A precursor to the Super X's, maybe.
Right. The TV reporter has one of my favorite lines in the movie. Listen to the monsters and their cries of certain death, or whatever it is that he says. Yeah. And then you hear me. But one of the scenes that I like, and I don't know if it was because movies, when you'd watch it on commercial television, were scheduled for a 90-minute block. The movie itself, without commercials, was a little over 90 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So they would cut it, certain parts out, and there were commercials in and such. So I remember when finally seeing the uncut version, or the full version, I think that scene where the Godzilla shows up in the jungle and the soldiers are fighting, I don't recall seeing that back in the day.
I told a friend of mine the same thing.
Yeah.
That I said, do you think when we finally scored our copy that everybody wanted, the one we were talking about a few years ago, the jungle scene, I said, do you remember this on TV? Is there more Godzilla in here? And he said, I don't.
Yeah.
So that's another person that just remembers the movie but doesn't really recall the jungle thing.
Yeah. So now you see the whole thing.
Right.
I'm picturing all these young people in the audience going, wait, you had to wait till they just showed it on TV and then it wasn't even the whole movie?
Yeah.
The hardships.
You know, one of the cool things though about that time period was, since we didn't have internet, VCRs, DVD players, all that kind of stuff, they did show them more in theaters. We used to always get, like in summertime, drive-ins especially back home, they would have like a triple bill feature, Dust to Dawn feature, pretty much just Godzilla movies in total stuff. Or sometimes a Harry House thrown in once in a while, but you know, that was a great time to be a kid.
Yeah, you could watch 3 of them for a couple bucks.
Couple bucks, yeah.
If you didn't mind sitting in the theater that long, they would play them that many in a row.
Right, and you'd get matinees on the weekends. Mom and Dad come drop you off for a quarter to get some popcorn and watch a movie, and they get the kids out of their hair to go shopping. And you know what parents do when kids aren't around: go shopping, plant the garden. And that day you drop the kids off at the movie, and I think about it now. Our parents would drop us off at the theater, and we'd be spending the whole afternoon there, unsupervised. The theater managers had no problem with it. Parents had no problem with leaving the kids to run amok inside of a movie theater.
And it just dawned on me that I must have really been annoying because my parents dropped me off at the theater a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, the other thing about this time period too, you know, it's like I don't want to trade, you know, what we've got now.
Right.
I love being able to watch anything I want, pretty much any time I want, in any format I want. But there was something about when these came on TV, every single time you saw these movies, it was an event. It was something special, you know, because you didn't know the next time you were going to see it. So.
Well, and the thing about that is, nowadays, when they do come on television, and they're on Svengoolie, or they're on another local broadcast, or they're on El Rey doing their Kaiju Lai Rorth marathon, or their Kaiju Christmas marathon, or Stars run. Stars just ran a weekend, just the weekend before G-Fest, very nice of them. Friday night until Sunday, the show of films and included Destroy All Monsters.
We had it on the entire time.
Yeah, and what we'll do is get on Facebook and say, oh, such and such is showing it right now, and everyone will get on there and that communal watching the movies just like in the old days when the kids, and it's got commercials. Who cares if it's got commercials? We're watching it
like
together.
what you're saying is it's an event, but it's different because we would talk about it at recess. Hey, tonight or Saturday at 3 it's on, and if you had another little group of kids that like the same thing, that was your social media. Right?
Speaking of social media, I think about now we do the Saturday night kind of discussion groups and stuff. I don't know, did anybody else do this? When I was little, there were a couple friends, but I had one friend in particular who was also super into all the monster movies and horror movies. And this had to have driven my parents absolutely crazy. But we would, when certain movies were on, especially things like Destroy All Monsters, every time there was a commercial break, we were on the phone to talk about the stuff we just saw. And what about that scene? And wasn't that cool? And there's like, oh, it's starting again. We'd have to hang up and run back to the other room. And my parents put up with all of that. That had to have driven them absolutely bonkers.
Now, I've never talked to anyone, especially at this show, that doesn't like this movie, but it's a possibility that this was too much for someone, or they just did it. Is there anyone out here right now that just thinks this one is just okay or just doesn't like it at all? Oh, there's a couple. That's more than I wanted to see, but
Steve doesn't like anything, so he doesn't count.
That's okay, you don't have to like this.
Right.
well, is there anybody out here that's like Martin and I and Jeff that thinks this is probably the best one? All right.
And that was the fun thing about it, was that as we come to learn later on, that this was going to be the end.
Right.
Yes, this was, let's finish it off right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to mention really briefly, get some people's thoughts on the heroine of the film, the female lead, which was Kyoko Manabe, played by Yukiko Kobayashi. I always wish she had been in more films. I think this was her only Godzilla movie, or kaiju film, and then she was in, she was in Yog, Monster from Space Amoeba, and then she was in one of the Vampire Doll, the first of the Vampire trilogy. And other than that, she hasn't really been in much, and I think she's so striking to look at, and I think she's really interesting to watch perform.
She plays a great villain.
Yes, and that's just it, she plays a great villain, and it's a shame that she becomes so weak.
Right.
After they remove the control, all of a sudden she becomes just background.
Right, and I always had a hard time, and I don't know if that was another thing they trimmed. There was another piece that I don't remember seeing until we saw the thing, but when they tear that earring out and the blood's just coming down, and
That'll still make you wince. Well, when you're a little kid, you're like,
right.
God,
Yeah.
torn right out for ears.
Right.
I always have a thing, like if I see, people with earrings who are tugging on the earrings, I'm always kind of doing this a little bit, and I'm just having this realization, it might actually be because of this movie.
Possibly so.
I actually got the opportunity to meet her in Japan on a tour, and on a dinner cruise. Pam and I were talking to her, taking our picture with her, and we were explaining to her how much we love this movie, how much everybody loves this movie. She was really stunned that anybody would even know and remember who she even was, let alone want to talk to her and get pictures with her. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of people who would love to see you come to Chicago in the summertime. I don't know, unfortunately with all these actors getting up in age, it's going to get harder and harder to convince people to make the trek, but I would love for her to be here, if for no other reason for her to see this, because I think she would be stunned at how popular she would be.
Oh, one thing I did want to throw into, since it was sort of like the wind-up ending of the original show of it, you might say, I think this is the last film that Ifukube scored for Toho. They did use his music in Godzilla vs. Gigan, but he didn't score it. That was just put together by the production team. And until Terra Mecha Godzilla came, that was the next time it was, so he didn't do any of the scoring for this stuff for a long time.
And the music in this one fits perfectly with you guys.
Yes.
All the themes are just really, really spot on when they work where they're supposed to work.
I realize I have the wrong Anguillus head in this picture. Sorry.
It's just comparison.
Yeah, see how much cooler the one from the Small Monsters
Yeah,
is?
that's why you put it up.
Right. But going back to the cut scenes, even though I know you want to go through that list, but the scene where I think it's Tsuchiya, when they take the little electronic out of his neck, I don't remember that from the original viewings. That was one that I thought, well, that's a little harsh.
At least I don't remember the actual cutting and all the
Yeah, because
blood.
I think I would have remembered that, because kids love that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't recall that being in the original television version.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that you're right, because I don't remember it either, but I always remembered when they're stomping on Gidra's head and blood is spurting out of his mouth, even though we were seeing it on a really pretty crappy, like 16mm print being broadcast. It was never really obvious as it is like on Blu-ray, that that's actually what's happening, but I still remember that, so I'm pretty sure I would have remembered the the neck surgery scene if they had not cut it.
Anybody want to ask something that
Yeah.
they don't know about that we might?
Hey, Randy. So the question is, on the movie posters, they list Mothra first. Why do they list Mothra first?
It could be just the popularity of Mothra, right?
Yeah, but Godzilla.
That's true.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the person who was putting that poster together was like, they gave him a list of the monsters, and he's like, okay, and then it looks good in this, maybe based on the spacing of the, they didn't want to put Mothra and Manda right next to each other, so the person who probably did it was clueless probably as to which ones were the really popular ones. Not that Mothra's...
Knew that King Ghidorah had way too many letters.
Yeah, that's too much, too many letters. I'm not sure if I know which poster that is, a poster with little white rectangles all over it.
Oh yeah, that's one of the Japanese movie posters over on Third Avenue Street.
Is that just the labels for the monster names? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. We have a mic coming to you, so that way we don't have to repeat the...
I have a question, but I just want to make a quick comment, looking at what you guys are saying. But I try to tell my own kids and younger people about how special the movies were back in the day, because you didn't have DVD, VHS. But I remember seeing this movie when I grew up in Waukegan up north in the early 70s at a 6 bottle cap, where you bring 6 bottle caps to the theater and get in for free in the afternoon. It was old Sinbad movies, but they showed Destroy All Monsters. And it was just packed to the gills, and it was like my first concert experience. It wasn't a concert, but that ending battle, just kids out of their seats just cheering. It was absolute mayhem. It was great. And also, not only would you look back then in the TV guide at the beginning of the week for movies, but one thing I did too, like with this and Twilight Zone when I first got to do it as a kid in the early 70s, if a movie like this was on at 1 in the morning and your parents would let you do it, you'd set the alarm. Because like you're saying, you might not see it for 5 years or 6 years. It did make it more special. I wouldn't trade the way we have it now for the world, but the specialty is kind of lost that you can watch at any time now. It just made them bigger to me somehow. But what I was going to ask is, I've always heard that Baragon was just fleetingly used in this movie because of the costume, but then you see these promotional things where you have Tanaka and Honda and Tsuburaya on set, and there's a Baragon costume there, and then you see him with the models. There was a costume, and it looked fine to me in these old pictures, but it would have been nice to have him more in the battle. The costume existed, unlike Baragon. I don't know why they wouldn't have been.
It wouldn't surprise me with the costume if it was good enough to have him pose there and take a picture,
right.
or like lean forward and do this. But if you want him to come up out of the ground, the ear would just fall off, and so it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was kind of a jerry-rigged. Just let's get it together so we can keep it in one piece long enough to get the shot. Any other? Yeah. Right in front.
So, no love for the myriad of weapons that appear in this movie?
Like the
I always
tanks that
thought
were like
the
armed
space
to the
pistols.
teeth.
Yeah, I love the fact that all these residential and business buildings in downtown Tokyo actually have all these like automated missile silos that just pop out of the roofs, and but the thing is, this is in the future, and they've clearly had a whole history of problems with giant monsters. Why wouldn't they do that?
Right. I do like the laser.
Yes.
And that goes on
And on and on.
attached by the
Every
cable.
time I watch that for the next week, I'm just walking around. And now you are.
You guys know what scene we're making fun of, right? When they're cutting the collecting up on the moon. Yeah. Maybe went on just 1 minute too long, but.
I will say, I love this movie, and I even love that scene, and I love that music, but sometimes when we're watching this late at night, if I'm gonna fall asleep in this movie, that's always the scene. Yeah.
I hear that they're remaking the King of Monsters in 2019. Do you think they would be able to redo this?
Well, actually, Gareth Edwards, when he was first involved with Godzilla, always said that he hoped to build to destroy all monsters, but since he has exited the project and they're really, I know Toho is planning to start making live-action Godzilla films after 2020, so I don't know what Legendary is going to do in response to that. So it would be awesome to see.
Yeah, I doubt we'd get a straight-up remake. What we'll do is we'll get like their version of Destroy All Monsters, because if they're, here Legendary is, they're building up their MonsterVerse, and Toho's going to have their MonsterVerse. At some point you're probably going to have their Avengers moment, right, where all of these monsters are on screen at once, and that'll be kind of a nod to this movie. But I think,
like Final Wars wasn't a Destroy All Monsters remake, but it was kind of a spiritual successor, so that might be what we get.
Real quick question. Voice actors are just absolutely phenomenal in the American version, right? That's real. But years later, I found out Hal Linden was one of the actors.
That's right.
Did G-Fest ever try to reach out to me to phone interview his memories of the movie?
did G-Fest ever reach out to Hal Linden, who, for young people, there was a very popular TV show called Barney Miller that he was the star of, but he was also a voice actor who worked on this and I think some other movies as well. I don't know. I mean, this maybe before my time. Maybe we did reach out, but not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, not that I remember. One or two more questions? Sure.
Hi, this will be quick. Is this the movie that ends with all the monsters being sequestered back
Yes.
on Monster Island?
A very long, slow pan out.
And I'm going to tell you that long, slow pan out, I'm going to embarrass my daughter. When she saw that as a little kid, she thought that was the saddest thing ever.
It kind of is, right? They play it up like, oh, look how happy all the monsters are back in captivity.
Back in their jail cell.
Lonely.
One thing I would have actually loved to have seen, I would love a prequel to Destroy All Monsters that actually shows how they captured all the
Getting
monsters and
everyone
got
to
them there.
Monsterland. Yeah.
Yes.
So in the current official timeline, it shows Destroy All Monsters is taking place in 1999, as it says on screen. But in some of the 70s movies, you kind of get little hints that those were intended to take place afterwards, like the references to Manda, which don't make sense at that time and such. Do you guys think it's the better decision that it stays as kind of the in continuity of the finale and the culmination of all the films, or do you think that maybe it might have been better to keep them in release, the chronology as release order?
I'll be honest with you. I don't worry too much about the chronology, especially since this was never, they weren't trying to put together a MonsterVerse when they did these movies. They just kind of did it on the fly, so I don't really get too caught up in it. I can always justify it and say, okay, the movies in the 70s actually took place in the 70s. This movie took place in 1999, and apparently along the way,
I think
Megalon was killed, so he's not on the island.
It doesn't bother me either. I don't think it means much. I think you're reading too much into it sometimes if you worry about having everything in a chronology. It's really its own thing, and And when you're making movies, you can write and rewrite stuff all over you want because it's all make-believe, right? So,
yeah. So I think we're gonna stop there because we have to make room for Satsuma's interview.